Good afternoon.
Mr. Paulson, Rico here. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Alex.
Rico, did you remind the chairperson that we are starting at 2?
I did, Mr. Paulson. Thanks for that.
Uh, Good evening, honorable members, and good afternoon or good day. Honorable member,
So Rico here, Chair.
I-
Afternoon.
Honorable
Yes.
Chair, Honorable
Good
Chair,
afternoon, Chair.
afternoon.
Afternoon,
Yes,
Chair.
I can see that we are able to make a quorum. So it means
We lost you, Chair. Chair. Unmute, Chair.
are you able to hear me?
Now, yes, Chair.
Okay. I was saying I welcome everybody in the meeting, our honorable members, and also our officials, and also the chairperson, and also the team from Nexa. We understand that the weather is not so good in other provinces. Even myself, where I am, it is not good. There was a hail, and also it's bad. I also want to say thanks God for those that have managed to survive, to drive wherever they come from, and also to reach their destination. Otherwise, I want to say be cautious in terms of driving in the road. The roads are slippery, and also there are many accidents that are happening due to the weather forecast. And this is gonna be like take the whole week until maybe the weekend. So everybody is welcome, and you are free to, excuse me, to say whatever that you think you would love to share with us in the meeting. But we'll try our level best to keep on time. And the secretary has already flighted the agenda. The next item in the agenda is apologies. Secretary, do you have any apologies with you?
I haven't received any apologies from any of the members, Chair. Chair, also, I see that the minister is on the platform as well, eh?
Oh, welcome, Minister. And the DM? What about the DM?
No, Chair, the DM is not on the platform.
Okay, thank you very much. We've had Minister that yesterday you forward your apology. We appreciate that. Whenever you are not going to be with us in meetings, you forward your apology. And we also want to welcome you back from Lesotho. We understand that you were with the president and you were a big delegation to Lesotho. And we know that, Okanye, we heard that it's not easy for the flights to take off and also to land, and you have to drive wherever that you are coming from to South Africa. You are also welcome, Minister, and we also appreciate that you always join our meetings whenever time allows you and permits you to be there. And the agenda, honorable member, has been flighted. There's nothing much today. We'll just hear from Nexa on what is it that has happened. And we would love to say, Nexa, we saw something that we never expected in your summit, or I will say conference. I don't know what do you call it, but we couldn't believe it was like a rally. Well done to you. I hope that everything will be in that mode, because we went away back home, having not forget the way that you were hands-on in the summit that you had. So we want to recommend and say halala to you, Nexa. And we hope that it's going to take like that. Let alone that you gave us small jerseys, which were nice, but now we can't wear them. They are too small and they are nice and comfortable. Thanks ever so much. With those opening remarks, I think I'm going to give the secretary. He is saying there are no apologies anyway. Then let's go to the adoption of the agenda. Then, if honorables allow me, can I see any hand that will adopt the agenda as proposed? And I see the hand of Honorable Vusinkosi and Honorable Mailem. Can we start by you, Honorable Mailem?
Chair, I propose the adoption of the agenda.
Thank you, Honorable. Happy belated birthday again. It will be a birthday throughout your month. We wish you all the best. Honorable Vusinkosi?
Thank you, Chair. I second the adoption of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Nkosi. The agenda has been adopted by Honorable Mailem and also seconded by Honorable
Recording in
Vusinkosi.
progress.
I don't know how have a one-day baby be able to say such a thing of adopting the agenda. She's still 1 day old. In fact, he has been born yesterday. So he has adopted the agenda. Thank you very much. And then can we then go to the minister? Minister, do you have any opening remarks in terms of telling us maybe what is it that we must expect in terms of the Nexa report and all what you think you want to share with us? Can we give you the platform, Minister?
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair, and greetings to honorable members, the Secretariat. Good afternoon to everyone on the call, and to join you in wishing Honorable Mailem a belated happy birthday. Just to say the following, I am joined by Mr. Dave Nichols, who's the chair of the board of Nexa, and also Mr. Loyiso Tiabashe, who's a group CEO of Nexa. I want to start by just expressing on behalf of the fraternity of the Energy and Electricity Department and Nexa, our appreciation at the attendance of the board on the occasion of the celebration of the 60th anniversary of the Safari reactor. As you know, the Safari is one of the only 3 active reactors on the continent. Of course, this is a research reactor. Nexa is at the cutting edge of nuclear technology in the country and also on the continent. I must also indicate that the International Atomic Energy Agency has designated Nexa to be part of what we call the Atoms for Peace project that is meant to ensure that we expand the frontiers of peaceful uses of nuclear. And in this instance, Nexa is leading in relation to medical isotopes that are used for detection and addressing or curing rather diseases such as cancer. Nexa is on the mend, and thanks to the work that has been done by Mr. Nichols and his eminent board. They've done tremendously well, I must say, Chair and the members of the committee, when they took over at Nexa. I think it was a shambolic organization from a corporate governance point of view. And they've really done a lot to ensure that they clear some of the AG findings, and they put Nexa on a good footing. We are not yet where we want to be, but I think that with the stewardship of Mr. Nichols, we are heading in the right direction. And also just to say that Mr. Tiabashe, as a group CEO, has been able to stabilize the management team there's a sense of direction, a new commitment, and I'm sure they have picked it up on the occasion of the 60th anniversary of Safari, the kind of work that Loyiso and the team are doing. We really want to congratulate the team. Again, we're not where we want to be, and of course, in the course of the presentation, we're going to pick up the areas that still requires attention, and I'm sure that with the advice and counsel of the portfolio committee, you'll be able to identify additional areas of improvement or areas that requires reinforcement. As I conclude, I must say that we have assigned Nexa responsibility of ensuring that we reset the nuclear agenda in the country. I think we have fallen back in relation to some of the progress that has been registered on the front of nuclear technology, where some of the leading countries, before we abandoned our pebble bed modular reactor program, when we put it under care and maintenance. But I'm happy that we are on course to leave the care and maintenance on the PBMR, but also ensure that we are able to partner with some of the leading players in the space. We just returned about a week ago with the delegation, and Mr. Tiabashe was part of that, and was able to get first-hand information on the commercialization of SMRs. China is one of only 2 countries that are known to have commercialized the SMR, and was able to experience it in person. Of course, the delegation had to split because of the size of the assignments that we had, so I couldn't join him on that excursion. But I led the conversation with an excise equivalent in China, CNNR, and also met the regulator on the nuclear front just to appraise ourselves on some of the advances that have been made in this area. We have every ambition of participating in the nuclear fuel cycle, the enrichment of the uranium, and I'm sure Mr. Tiabashe and Nichols will take you through what some of those ambitions are. We're also happy to announce that in the current budget, as part of that 1 trillion rand infrastructure investment, Nexa is going to get an allocation approximately 1.2 billion rands over the medium-term framework to ensure that we proceed with our multi-purpose reactor. Of course, that's just a drop in the ocean. We need significantly more than that, but at least there's an allocation to help us to put together, if you like, a feasibility study, and through our engagement with our Chinese partners, I think there's great appetite for them to partner with us. And we did sign a memorandum of understanding to enable this area of work to proceed. So I thought I must just share, so I guess that the rest of the detail will be shared by my colleagues, the Chair, Mr. Nichols, and Loyiso. But thank you very much, Chair, for extending the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Minister, who have also assisted me in terms of reminding me that it was a celebrations, not summit, no, a conference. It was celebrations. We enjoyed ourselves in those celebrations. We were excited also to see other things that are not familiar and hear other information. And yeah, thank you very much for those opening remarks. And we also want to say we really appreciate that you are saying the same thing that you said in terms of how much Nexa has been given out of the budget that we are still going to approve and reapprove it. Thanks ever so much, Minister. We really appreciate the hard work that you are doing. Can we then give over to Nexa to present their story?
Thank you, Honourable Chairman, Honourable Minister, Honourable members. I'm just going to a couple of slides from the Chairman's point of view, and then I'll pass across to the Chief Executive to present the main guts of it. Most of my thoughts have already been expressed by the minister, so thank you. He shortened my speech. I just comment that yes, when the new board was appointed in 2020, and when I say a new board, we walked in and there was nobody from the old board left in the building, and we had a bit of a interesting start. We have stopped the bleeding. We had financial and governance issues. I think both of those are put safely behind us. I don't know of a single acting post at the top level of Nexa at the moment. We have a full board. We've stabilized the organization and we've sorted it out for growth. And I think it's very important to understand the concept that Nexa, as from the old Atomic Edge Corporation, had been decreasing and contracting since the 1980s. And essentially what we've managed to do now is stabilize the organization, both in governance and in finances, and we're now ready in a situation to grow. And we look forward to the support of the committee and the government and the ministry in some of the issues that will be raised later by the CEO. As will be shown later, we've improved the audit results. We were several years disclaimed before, and we are now last year's audit results, the ones for the previous year, we were unqualified. We had some clean audits out of the group, and the worst we had was an unqualified audit. So we're in extremely good shape for the audits. We hope to be a clean audit this year. I'm assured by the CFO and by the CEO that we'll get to a clean audit this year for every organization in Nexa. I look forward and hope. Financial stability, you'll see the numbers later on. In fact, the projections for this year in the budget presented is somewhat less than we are currently actually calculating at the end of cycle. And we are looking, I think, respectable in that area, certainly given that we had a 93 million reduction in our allocation last year for the state. And we've moved the performance of shareholder compact from 50%, it says, to above 80, in fact, some 93% last year, and the previous year and the year just closed, we believe we're also at 93. The rationalization that we embarked on in 2021, because clearly the company wasn't that well structured, is a better organization. We've had no job losses. I will say we've restructured, and I worked out recently that every single direct report to the CEO is a different name in boxes than it was prior. So we've restructured the entire management team, and the results are clear in the results you're going to see. We have a 5-year strategy, which was first approved 4 years ago. So we're now into the final year of the currently approved strategy, and the board will start developing a new strategy for the next 5 years up to financial year 2030-31, based on the framework that's been approved by the department. And I think the key thing, as the minister mentioned, is to stop being defensive and to take the mandate in the Act that instructs us what to do in terms of development and research in which areas, and to move those forward on a competitive commercial basis in the marketplace. And if someone says the South African industry can't compete in the world market, I will mention, and it'll be mentioned several times, I suspect, that Nexa is currently one of the 3 large suppliers of radiopharmaceuticals to the world market. We hold about 20% of the world market. And of interest, we're the only one that covers the full cost of operating the reactor assigned with that from the sales. So we're the most efficient producer of radioisotopes as far as we're aware in the world. And we look forward to sharing our plans and our results with the portfolio committee today. And with that, I'm going to hand over to the CEO. So Mr. Bashi, our CEO, will now carry on from here. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Nicole. We really appreciate your words of wisdom in terms of Nexa. And then let's give over to the CEO. Thank you very much. Continue, CEO.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and thanks for the warm words. If we can just go back to the first slide, please. And also appreciate that you enjoyed the event that we had that was celebrating the biggest milestone, which is the 60 years of our plant, which has continued to operate quite efficiently over its life. And also thanks, Minister, for your kind words as well in terms of your introductory remarks. Those remarks from both the Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee and the Minister can only encourage us to do better and want to do better. If I tee off then from the original mandate that we're given in terms of what we needed to present here, it was the Nexus strategy in terms of where we are and how we've moved, the corporate plan and the shoulder compact for the year ahead, which is what we just submitted now in February, as well as the budget for the year. So I'll be covering those three in collaboration with the CFO, Group CFO, Ms. Hawate. So if you go back to the previous slide, there are two strategies that we're going to be sharing. The strategy, the first one is the strategy that was approved 4 years ago. And I'll give the background of that. And as the Chairperson correctly said, that's the strategy that we're in the final year of implementation with the shareholder compact and the corporate plan that we submitted. Then in the next financial year, we'll be starting with a new strategy as well as the new corporate plan that will be talking to implement that strategy. However, we're in a transitional path because the board has done with us some work in terms of the transitional framework, which I will share in terms of what we expect in the next cycle this time next year. Thanks. Then if we look at the rationale for the strategy that we're in the final year of implementing now, we had a Nexa company that had a prolonged financial loss situation, which was not sustainable. It was coupled also with the fiscal pressure on the government side, because as a research institute and as a company that does some state mandates, there is an element of a grant allocation for those specific mandates, but that has continued to either shrink or stagnate. And that is not going to change anytime soon. So we had to be alive to that. Secondly, we had cost containment measures that were utilized in the past to keep the costs, but you can only keep costs so much before you start stifling the organizational growth going forward. The other issue was that we had disparate business units, and it was important to streamline the Nexa business, both from an operational and a financial basis, so that it could lead to an improved performance all round, because the silo mentality had crept in so much that we needed to embark on that rationalization process that Mr. Nichols was talking about. The governance, including the audit opinions, were not looking good. In actual fact, most of them were disclaimers, especially for Nexa and subsidiary Pelchem for a few years. But it was important that we move that to an investor-grade company, wherein we said we needed to get to a minimum of an unqualified audit. And it is gratifying to say still within the strategy period, we've achieved that milestone, and we want to do better by ensuring that we have a clean audit, which is unqualified without findings. We also noted that human capital always remains crucial, and we needed to have an organizational culture that would shift from the different microcultures that we saw to a single high-performance culture that we needed to take the organization forward. And that was very important for us to understand the situation in 2021. And then as we moved on in developing the strategy, that strategy was developed and approved by the board. If we move to the next slide, yes, it was approved by the board. And it's a strategy that has got a mental framework of a house with very clear foundational aspects of a mandate, which we draw primarily from the Act that finds us, which is Nuclear Energy Act of 1999. We also have a very clear vision in that we don't only play in the local space, we play in the global space where we touch people positively in a socio-economic way, and also our mission in terms of how do we get to the vision point. Most importantly has been the values. We distilled our values from the original, back in the day, 9 to 5, which is a handful that is always spoken about as something that people can always internalize. And we gave it an acronym of EASY, which talks to excellence, accountability, safety first, integrity, and innovation. That became important for the staff to internalize it and own it. And I must say that I think it's a well-known and well-understood concept within our stable. What we came up with, taking into account the frame and the pinch points from the previous slide, was the financial recovery as one of the recovery strategies. Financial recovery and sustainability became important. Research and innovation, we wanted to elevate research and innovation because we are a research and innovation center after all in the nuclear space. We also noted that we do have these sub-entities that we've created to be our commercial vehicles, and we wanted to make sure that they remain stable in a profitable space. Hence, we have the profitable commercial enterprises. Then the business continuity and efficiency. So there were many duplicated efforts, and we streamlined those together, and the rationalization came in here so that we could be an efficient organization that utilizes the limited resources quite fruitfully. And most importantly, the talent excellence and high performance culture became very important, because you can have everything you want, but if you don't have people, if you don't have competent people, and if you don't have a conducive culture and environment, then you can't move forward. That was all with the ultimate goal of ensuring that we have financially sustainable organization with efficient operations and good governance. And I must state that this strategy has really been the embodiment of our recovery of the organization, where the chairperson said, we've stopped the bleed, we've stabilized the organization, and then we're positioned for growth. I must say, this house and the mnemonic that we see in front of us has really been a center point for our recovery. Can we move to the next, please? So it was very important that in the old cliche of saying structure follows strategy, that after we developed the strategy, we came to a structure that was going to implement that strategy. And we came with this structure with 8 divisional areas. Obviously, of the 8, 3 being market-facing on the extreme right, and 3 support functions at the top, as well as the other organizations that provide services to the rest of the organization. I think most importantly here, as the chairperson indicated, these are permanent appointments in the role, so there's no acting. We're proud to share the diversity, both in terms of age for the level of the organization, in terms of gender, and in terms of race. I think we do reflect South Africa that we live in. But we will continue to endeavor to have more diversity in the functional areas as well. But it's a very good start that we have 3 out of the 8. And I believe that these structures, as they were developed, they were meant also to bring back the subsidiaries that had continued now to operate slightly on their own as independent entities, and they've come back, and we now do operate as a group structure instead of subsidiaries that operate on their own. And I must say that we've got the committed and the competent leaders at this level of the organization. Then implementing the structure with the high-level resource that I've just shown has really yielded us positive results. And it is very crucial that if we look at the top left, we look at the annual audited results for the financial years 2020-21 to 23-24. We have steadily moved up from the disclaimed positions in the earlier years, some organization transitioning through qualified, and proud to say that at the end of 2023-24, all entities were unqualified, some with findings, some with no findings. Our goal for this year, that will be for when we do the audit starting now in the end of May, is that we aspire to have everyone unqualified with no findings, which is also defined as a clean audit. Also, as the chairperson said, in the past year, we achieved the performance against the shareholder measures and in the order of 93%, and this year looks poised to be the same percentage, 93%, which shows a very good improvement from earlier years of poor performance of about 50% to well above 80%, which is our internal target. In terms of profit or loss statements, we come from huge losses of about 320 million for the group to 2 years of 22-23 and 23-24 of positive triple-digit profits. This is very important because while Nexa had sustained losses for many years in the past, the balance sheet has started not looking good. So these profits at this point in time, I would want to say, for the lack of a better word, they are closing those gaps that have been created with the loss situation for many, many years. But also, as the chairperson said, this year that will be under audit, we are actually poised for a profit as well. And I believe that this is the evidence that the strategic framework that I showed, which is the house with foundational aspects, has given us positive results. It was important that our staff really carried us through this because they co-developed the strategy, they owned the strategy, and we routinely fed back on where we were and where we needed to change the course all along. Thanks. Next slide. What was also important for us was that we needed to have meaningful engagements with our stakeholders, and we have a stakeholder map that we measure ourselves against. And as you can tell, right at the top, we've got the shareholder government represented by the minister in this meeting as a head, and also we've got Parliament, which is one of those. So we do take these engagements very seriously because each of those blocks do have a meaningful role to play in order to understand where we should be going and whether we're going the right way according to the different needs and wants of the different stakeholders. But I must state that we've done very well along this wheel, and we need to just improve on many areas such as the non-governmental organizations, which continues to be an area that we need to engage more and more, and bearing in mind that some of them are strategically opposed to the nuclear technology as it stands. And as a strategic approach, what we did is we followed your classical continuity and jumping from one strategy to the other without obviously changing fundamental course. So we said, as we mature in this implementation of this 5-year phase, we're bound to have a bit of a decline because that's human nature. Human nature wants to see different things to stay excited. And we already started about a year or so ago working on a framework for the new growth of a new strategy. And this was discussed and approved by the board already in November last year. And what we are looking at doing now is to cement that to be the key strategy instead of it being a transitional framework, and embed it in the operational plan for implementation or corporate plan for implementation. So, as we always say, successful businesses, especially the nuclear sector, does require continuous innovation as we move along, just to avoid those declines as strategies and plans mature. So that's what we did, and as such, we transitioned from the house, if we move to the next slide, from the house to adding next to the house the impact programs, high impact programs that we call them, which is the 6 on the right. In that, number 1, our act does call for us to participate in the front-end fuel part, and we're implementing that because it's an area that Nexa had abandoned, and with a stable organization, we're poised to get back into that. I'll talk in a bit of detail a bit later then. We also need to look at the power generation side in the form of small modular reactors and any other technology that would be linked to our nuclear operations going forward. The neutron source generation part talks to the Safari reactor that we had, that we celebrated, and the new reactor that we plan to implement to dovetail with Safari, and that is called the multi-purpose reactor. Then the NTP work is under that block of radioisotope production and services, and that we need to grow that. We already are one of the top 3 suppliers, and we need to show our dominance globally in that sphere. Fluorochemicals talks to one of the businesses that we are recovering, which deals with a very nasty chemicals in the form of fluorine-based products. It's been bleeding, but we are arresting that bleed over the years, and we are poised to improve that. We need to stabilize that organization and grow both the market and the products so that we can move that business forward. And once again, skills development becomes an important aspect as we talk about nuclear development, and as it dovetails to probably the future iterations around the integrated resource plan, which will talk more nuclear. So we need to have more skill base in this country going forward. So the strategy was reaffirmed and supported by high impact programs. It gives us a solid base for delivery in the long term for sustainability. The next slide. So if I go a little bit in detail, but I won't go too much detail on those, but just to elaborate on those 6 programs. So on the front end fuel supply, we talk about conversion of uranium, enrichment of uranium, as well as manufacturing different fuel types. HALEU, which is fuel for the research reactors like the one we have, target plates that are used for isotope production that NTP sells so profitably in the international sphere. Pressurized water reactor components like the Quebec plants. We want to supply some of the components related to those fuel assemblies that are used at Quebec, as well as triso fuel, which is the fuel that is typically used in small modular reactors. We'll prioritize our implementation of those elements. So those are multiple projects that we are looking at growing the organization with. And then the next one was that one on leading power generation with small modular reactors. So our view is that we need to look at SMRs because they have become the topical item in the nuclear power generation space, and we can't be left behind. At some point, we were the leaders, and we need to look at that solution as well as maybe micro reactors as well, because we talk about medium reactors and micro reactors. And we are prioritizing 3 key projects in this one. One is the PBMR transfer from Eskom to us, for us to look at what are the elements of the IP that are usable. And we do have 2 structures on our side, one for the testing components and the other one for fabricating fuel. We want to utilize those going forward and partner with the right partners. We're looking at some point having a pilot plant at Pelindaba for multiple uses, not just for electricity generation, for power generation, for process heating, and possibly isotope generation as well. And we're looking at partnering with Eskom for fleet rollout and repurposing the coal power stations going forward. So the 3rd program on neutron source generation, as I've said, Safari has reached 60 years, and the licensed period is up to 2030, and we are working on extending plant life by another decade or 2 because the plant still has more life in it. And also we're looking at utilizing the amount that the minister once again announced, reconfirming his support to our endeavor of starting the work around the multi-purpose reactor and expanding the neutron source applications. The 4th program is on increasing the footprint on the radioisotope part. We've got 3 main components, but there's a whole lot of other isotopes that we are looking at expanding. Molybdenum, lutetium, and iodine become the central feature in terms of keeping the stability of that organization. And then the 5th one is on fluorochemicals, which is the PELChem part. And in there, whilst we're looking at those front-end parts, which is the hydrofluoric plant that we need to develop, and the bulk fluorine plant, as well as the xenon difluoride, what we're looking at high-end value products, which is low volume, but high profit margins. So that's what we're going to be doing going forward with that organization. And that's been the fundamental recipe for turning it around. And then the skills build up. We need to, as we have now our Nexa Learning Academy inside, we need to relocate it and build a more state-of-the-art facility outside, maybe closer to the area where we celebrated Safari, so that it's easily accessible by the people that we train, because currently being inside the National Key Point has got its own challenges. And we're looking at more partnerships with academia, vocational training institutions, as well as SITAs. and then increase the skills base for our use, for the current use, and also for these 6 programs. What we have done as part of that process, we looked at our 6 programs on the left and looked at the priority areas at the top, which is the Department of Electricity and Energy, to see whether there was any alignment on these. I won't go into detail, but most importantly, as we discussed this with the DEE team, there is a whole big degree of alignment in terms of the shareholder organization and what we intend doing for growing our organization. This gives us comfort in that as we submit our strategy, it already talks to the alignment in terms of what the government through DEE is looking at doing and implementing for our nation. The next slide, please. So that's really the strategy framework. Just in summary of the strategy framework, then we've transitioned from 1 to 2, but in that transition, we've just added the growth programs, which inside themselves have got the projects that we're implementing. Now, into the corporate plan and the shoulder compact for the year under discussion. What has also helped us was to say we'll use that strategic framework, which is the house, and use those pillars as the key performance areas as we implemented this. And in that, we also expanded the key performance areas into key performance indicators, which is 15 of them in total for all those pillars that we have, which are the KPAs. And we monitor these on a routine basis, monthly at ExCo, the board of directors and the ministry and shareholder, and national treasury on a quarterly basis. We do also get our performance assessed by the Auditor General of South Africa, as well as reporting to Parliament generally twice a year, which is this time and also in October when we present our integrated annual report. And I think this framework of reporting and accountability has helped us, and it has kept us as an executive on check in terms of how to manage going forward. Next slide, please. And just to recap in terms of what we expect to see of the year that we just finished in March, which will be audited in June and July, we expect that we'll meet 14 of the 15 KPIs. One that has let us down is one on the Pelcam stable, which has got a good story to tell in itself in that it has more than halved its losses that it has made last year. And even the previous year, it had halved the losses. So we are really poised for a positive trajectory in terms of profitability. And we won't let that part of the business fail going forward. We'll provide the requisite support that we need. But we are projecting to finish at 93%, as the chairperson said, but these still await the audit to come. Then, if I go now to the indicators that we have for the current financial year that we just started now on the 1st of April, you look at the column financial year 25-26 as the targets. And we also look at the previous year, which we use as a base. But suffice to say that we put the targets there as the year still needs to be audited. So we can't really put what a project until those are audited. But you'll see a great degree of similarity in terms of the targets, where we target for the group a 57 million rand profit. We are targeting also an unqualified audit opinion with no findings. For research and innovation pillar, we're looking at having 40 million rand in terms of diversifying our product offering, as well as income streams outside in order to relieve pressure from the fiscus. We're also looking at contributing to the body of knowledge in terms of the peer-reviewed articles and innovation disclosures with 20 and 6 respectively. The next slide. Being the profitable commercial enterprises, NTP, we are looking at 48 million rand profit on that particular part of the business, with the view that we'll be using most of the proceeds that it generates to grow on some of its projects that it needs to grow the product stream accordingly. Pelcam was looking at having a break-even, almost a break-even, but they've ended up at a loss situation. But for the year that we just started, we're looking at an 8 million rand profit going forward. Safety remains important when you look at business continuity and efficiency, in that we're targeting an industry standard of less than 1.8 in terms of the disabling injury rate, as well as the public dose, because we're a nuclear facility. So we measure the dose against the national nuclear regulator requirements, that we stay behind the figure of 0.25 millisieverts per annum. And also for continuity, we're looking at our reactor number of the days available per year for operating our reactor. We're targeting 287. This takes into account the age of the plant that we have, because it is very important that we implement maintenance accordingly. But on our recent trip, it was very interesting to see a plant that is about 20 years old that only could manage to operate, this was in China, to operate only for about 143 days per year. So it showed us that there is something that we're doing rather well in this country to be beating younger reactors in much bigger economies. So a job well done there, and we're looking at maintaining that standard going forward. Then on the neutron sources, we're looking at obviously MPR, because we've been given funding. We've got an annual plan of action. We're looking at implementing 100% of those particular activities there. And similarly, on the decontamination and the decommissioning annual plan, we're looking at implementing 95% of that plan that we have submitted to the shareholder. Then the last pillar talks to talent excellence and high performance culture. So for the year, we're looking at developing a talent pipeline, because that becomes important. You'll note that in some instances, the nuclear industry has not attracted the right skills, and we needed to do something different. And we need to attract those skills and make sure that, especially the critical positions, we fill them in the right number of days. The knowledge management and employee retention becomes very important in this period of growth, as well as the transformation index that we have in line with our employment equity targets at the index of 1. That becomes very, very important. And I foresee that as we talk about skills development and growth for the new growth plan, these will be somewhat different, because we're talking about a growth phase versus a maintenance phase, which was what this final year was all about. And at this point in time, I think the next slide talks to the budget. I will hand over to the Group CFO, Ms. Precious Howard.
Thank you, CEO. Good afternoon, Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Members, Honorable Minister, DEE, and NECSA delegation. So in terms of where we are with the budget, we're looking at the budget over the MTF period, and we've also gone a bit further back to have sight of the trajectory in terms of where we are coming from and where we are going to. So if we look at where we were historically, we're sitting in triple-digit losses, which we exceeded as a company was not sustainable. Our first strategy was then to reduce the losses, which we saw in the subsequent years, and thereafter we started targeting to go into a situation of triple-digit profits. So that was what we were able to successfully attain from the 2023 and 2024 actuals. However, the committee will then note that in terms of the current financial year that we have just come out of, 2024-25, we are then projecting and are forecasting a loss, a decline, but albeit still a profit. And the main reason for that is what the CEO has mentioned, the grant cut that we received of the 93 million. Over the MTF period, the cut has been about 300 million. But suffice to say, we're also quite grateful for the funding that we received for the MPR, which is a ring-fenced amount of 1.257 billion. Going forward, what we are seeing in the current 25-26 is the increase in terms of expenses that we have seen in this period, but we expect to start recovering the triple-digit profits in the subsequent financial years, even though we're still targeting to try and see if we can still improve the results. The main levers we've been using in terms of receiving and reaching these results have been in terms of diversification of revenue on the revenue line item, as well as making sure we can optimize the expenses. So on the expenses, our target is to try and see how we can get more for less, essentially sweating the assets, so to speak. So that is the current trajectory we are seeing in terms of the budget. The budget that we look at looks at the group, which is the Nexa group. The Nexa group is the one which is made up of the Nexa SOC, Pelchem, as well as the NTP group. So the Nexa SOC is where we received the grant cut of the 93 million, but suffice to say, as part of that 57.242 million, we were still targeting to get to at least a break even. The current results which are under audit at the moment, we are slightly above that, and that is the effort that the company has been having in terms of driving an aggressive diversification of revenue strategy, as well as optimization of expense strategy. In terms of Pelchem, while we are slightly below break even in terms of where we landed up at the end of the financial year, when we see the trajectory in terms of the Pelchem environment, we have noted a marked improvement. 3 years ago, in terms of Pelchem, we're sitting at about 62 million loss. The prior financial year, we're sitting at about 42 million loss. And currently, we're sitting in the region of just below break even in terms of the results. So we are seeing the green shoots in that environment. In the NTP group environment, we are seeing the profitability of the group, and we're still trying to make sure that we can try and push these numbers as much as possible to optimize the revenue, as well as making sure that we are prudent in terms of our management of the expenses. When it comes to the statement of financial position, this has been a statement we have been quite focused on because as we go out to try and get external funding, the main thing that funders look at is the trajectory that we are showing in terms of where we are from the assets and the liabilities. So for the group, one thing which is quite positive is that we're in a positive situation as it pertains to equity. And that is one thing which has been considered in terms of looking at the funding. For the group, what we also have are the CapEx items. So we have a split in terms of items which are funded and ones which are unfunded. So the unfunded items are the ones we've been trying to go and approach various investors in terms of trying to get funding thereof. The ones that are funded are the ones which are funded per specific mandates. And what we do in terms of the governance principles is that we ring-fence funds specifically for what the intended purpose is. And we ensure that we do not touch those funds because that also aligns and gives confidence to the investors that when they invest in us, we're able to essentially make sure that their funding is going to what they are funding at the end of the day. And we report back on that as part of, for instance, now we're currently in the audit process. So this is the split in terms of the funding of the assets that we have for the group. And then in terms of the cash flow, we have been managing our cash flow. And the most important thing in terms of the cash flow is to make sure that we're able to fund and make sure that we've got working capital for the day-to-day operations. One of the reasons that has led to the reduced cash flows that we see has been obviously in terms of going into the funding of the assets that we need to purchase. We also purchase target and fuel plates internationally. So those are quite a significant amount of money. We're looking at in the region of about 150 to 200 million on an annual basis as it pertains to this fuel and target plates that go into our Safari reactor. In subsequent financial years, what we have also done is to then, the initial years have the biggest assets that we start purchasing, and then in the subsequent financial year, we expect a situation of being able to leverage off. So what I was speaking to in terms of the assets is what we see contained in this slide, where we see that a majority of the asset purchases are taking place in terms of the current financial year 25-26. The main reason for that is so that we can start optimizing purchasing to be able to start seeing the results of the assets that have been purchased in terms of the return of investments that we're seeing. So in terms of this, we have also been looking at things around the high impact program and the assets that support those. But the most important thing we have been looking at in this environment is to see how we can optimize as much as possible, as soon as possible, which is why we see the bigger amount of the investment in the initial years. And then in the latter years, we expect to start seeing the results and the income that is starting to come through from the investment that we would have put in from 25-26 and 26-27 financial year. So the growth projects are part of the new strategy for growth, and these will require far more CapEx shown above. So we have been speaking about the high impact program, but in a lot of these, what we are seeing is that there is a lot of investment that is required. With that, I'll hand back over to the CEO.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hawadi. And just in concluding, then, it is important to state that our next group strategy we began implementing in 21-22 has really led us to stability and improved performance, as I've shown in those fundamentally 3 areas, which is profitability, performance, as well as audit outcomes. The turnaround does give us a solid base for a strategy focused on growth, fueled by the role of nuclear technology internationally. As we've seen and heard, there is more discussions around nuclear technology use around the world than we had in the past. We hear nations talking about tripling, especially the European nations, tripling their nuclear base by 2030. And there are many other nations that are following on the same trajectory. So there's going to be a much bigger space for the nuclear technology to play internationally. Our 6 high-impact programs are very key in achieving our strategic objectives. And we are really dependent on appropriate funding structures, partnership models, as well as public acceptance, because the big part of our of the Achilles heel of the nuclear programs is public acceptance. And that's the work that we're going to be doing in earnest this year. You're going to be seeing more and more of us going out there talking about nuclear as a technology. And with that public acceptance, we count on being able to solicit and get those partnerships and funding models that we need. Very important, our people remain an important aspect of our business in enabling our strategy, and as such, our emphasis is on developing and retaining talent in this particular sphere. And last but not least, the support and oversight from the shareholder bodies has enabled us to have the turnaround that we are seeing today, while we maintain proper governance and compliance to ensure sustainable operations into the future. So we're very, very much happy to have this oversight, because it really, like I said earlier on, keeps us on track in terms of what is important, what is paramount for this country and for our people. And the support from the shareholder ministry, including the shareholder representative in the room, is really unparalleled. But also the support that we've gotten here and the direction that we've gotten here in Parliament through the Portfolio Committee has been immense. With that, I'll hand over to the board chairperson. I don't know if he wants to add anything else, Mr. Nichols.
Thank you, Louisa. Not particularly, but I will just make one comment about the funding. And we're going to put numbers around that are extremely large numbers for funding. And in our view at the moment, there are going to be 3 discretely different approaches. Some things we are doing are state activities, which for various reasons would end up being controlled by the state and only by the state. And those, I think, we're going to end up having to rely upon direct state support. But there are other ones that can be essentially fully private, and we would then be supporting a local company doing a private activity. And there is a combination of public-private partnership in the middle. So I think that one of the problems, or one of the challenges going forward the next year or so, is working out how we get the different elements of our programs funded from the combination of private sector and state, and a combination of both. But I think that we look positively on the way forward with these, and that I would be very worried if anybody came to the committee from Nexsa now or in the future and said, we've now reached the end point of success. We will never do that. There's always another mountain to climb. But I think that we are in a much better position and a much more stable condition than we were a few years ago. So with that, I'll pass back to the chair or the minister, and thank you for the time, and we look forward to the questions and comments arising from this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. We really appreciate the presentation. Now, I will give over to the members to interact with the presentation. Thank you, CEO. I see a hand of Honorable Paulson, followed by Honorable Singh, and followed by Honorable Milem, and Honorable Bapti, Honorable Vosi. Will finish and end up by Honorable Fasia. Can you start, break the ice, Honorable Paulson?
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Thank you very much, Mr. Nichols and Mr. Taibashi. Thank you very much for the presentation. 3 quick questions. In 2002, China completed 5 nuclear builds. The duration of these nuclear builds ranged from 5 to 7 years. Koeberg was started in 1976 and it took 8 years. China's overseas builds in Pakistan, in Karachi, took 7 years. Now we've got a history in this country that projects run well over time and well over budget. Are we looking to collaborate with China or Chinese companies to ensure that we are able to quickly deliver nuclear power stations, especially using the small modular reactors, especially in remote areas where we struggle to electrify homes in those areas? And also, Safari 1 reactor uses a low enriched uranium, and it's been using that fuel since 2009. Could you tell us what happens to the spent fuel and what measures are in place to ensure the safety and to ensure the public that the spent fuel will not have any effect on them? And also, I think Safari 1 has been I think there was a comment made at the 60th anniversary where you said that politics has transcended, or rather science has transcended politics. I mean, we've had different governments over the past 60 years, but Safari 1 has stood the test of time and has delivered more than what we imagined it would. It provided several academic degrees, PhDs, research papers, and research programs. And I'd just like to know that those people that have done this wonderful work and has worked for Nexa, what is the retention of those skills that would further benefit the country going forward? Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable. Followed by Honorable Singh, as I have called you, and will be followed by Honorable Milem. Over to you, Honorable Singh.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, let me also firstly appreciate the presentation and congratulations on the turning around of the entity to stop the bleeding. Hopefully this turnaround strategy can be used as a benchmark for other entities, not only within the Department of Electricity and Energy, but other departments within government itself. Chair, let me then go to my short few questions, 5 questions that I have. First is, besides engineering services and products that are offered from Nexa to Koeberg, are there any other beneficial services or areas of collaboration that Nexa offers to Koeberg? Secondly, what is the percentage of budget spend on research and development, understanding that this is a key focus for Nexa? And what is the level of cooperation with the Department of Science and Innovation, as well as other relevant departments, organizations? Noting also that the critical need for maths and science in South Africa What also educational programs do you have to attract young people in order to jump the curve, as was indicated, which represents a point of inflection? And thirdly, Chair, your human capital is important for the implementation of your strategy and the development of the organization. But what is similar to Honorable Paulson's question, what is Nexa's rate of human capital attrition, and what is done to retain your institutional knowledge? And then penultimately, Chair, South Africa is the 11th largest producer of uranium. To what extent is Nexa involved in beneficiating this resource and leveraging on our competitive or comparative advantage that we have with regards to uranium? And then finally, why the projected deterioration in net profit for NTP? This is on slide 20 for the 25-26 year. Could you elaborate on that? Thank you, Chair.
Chair, can I proceed? Okay, I'm going to go ahead. Thank you very much for the presentation. So let me start with a couple of questions regarding your KPIs. And the first one that I have relates to KPI number 11, neutron source generation. And it says 100% execution of the MPR annual plan of action. That's your target. Now, I don't have a problem with that, but we don't know what your MPR annual plan of action is. So could you unpack what that plan of action for MPR for this financial year looks like? Similarly, with regard to KPI number 12, the percentage execution of decontamination and decommissioning and the annual plan of action, what does that look like? What are you planning to do? When are you going to do it? And how much are you going to spend on it? Can you break that down for me? Then, and I don't know who wants to take this and run with it, but maybe Mr. Nichols, he and I have had a few discussions about it over the past few years, but maybe he wants to do it, or maybe the CEO can do it. So there's been a lot of talk about small modular reactors. My question is, firstly, what do you envisage Nexa's role with regard to small modular reactors is? In other words, what do you see Nexa actually doing? Secondly, could you please explain to this committee exactly what the current status globally of small modular reactors are? To my knowledge, there are only 2 in commercial operation, one being in Russia and the other being in China. And there are several under development, and there are several in various stages of licensing, but that the timeline for those small modular reactors is several years away before they are commercially viable. I'd like it put on record clearly what sort of timeline you envisage small modular reactors being commercially available in South Africa and usable to generate power onto our grid. Because there's a lot of misinformation. So I'd like it from the horse's mouth. When do you see it likely that South Africa would be able to procure a small modular reactor and install it in, I don't know, some small town somewhere, Alice in the Eastern Cape? When is that likely to happen? Because the reality is that it's several years away, and I'd like to get a clearer perspective. My last question is this. Pelchem has run at a loss for several years. Last year, you forecast a small profit. Instead, you've come back with a small loss. This year, you're forecasting an 8.6 million profit. And I do appreciate the fact that Pelchem is showing a positive trend. But my question is it likely to actually be profitable this year? Or is this, again, a mistaken forecast? So I'd like some clarity as to exactly what you're doing in that regard. Oh, one last question. In your annual report last year, you indicated that, sorry, I'm just going back to it. You indicated that there was a focus on improving financial ratios to achieve investment grade status. Now, could you please identify the specific financial ratios that you are targeting for improvement in 25-26, and what exactly you are doing to improve those ratios? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Mailem, Honorable Bapti, followed by Honorable Ngosi, and the last one is Honorable Fasia. Thank you. I like
Thank you,
when you
Chair.
say that. I like when you say Alice in Eastern Cape. I like that one. Sure.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, it's always good to get good news. Chair, most of the questions I have been answered. I'm not going to go through them again. There's just two remaining. And the one is if we could have some expansion on the non-current liabilities on page 25, within the financials. And then the one I do want to focus on here is the high impact program of capacitating and strengthening skill development as a service offering. Now, what I did notice is that in the targets, there weren't any targets associated with that particular program, and I just wonder why. Should it not be one of the targets? But I also would like to find out about what is Nexa planning to do in terms of the Learning Academy. I heard that there was intentions to move off the existing site to somewhere that's more accessible. And how big would the institution be? How many students? Have they gone down to that level of planning? But if we could have some detail around the skills program. My view is that it's extremely important that we have a skills program in the sciences for the future. And if it's going to be industrializations we're going for to raise our economic growth, then clearly this is got to be one of our objectives. Thank you.
Chair, I don't know if I can come in. Okay.
Yes, yes, you can come in, followed by Fasia.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity. Greetings also to the Honorable Minister, honorable members in the meeting, and all honorable colleagues. Chair, I just have only four questions that maybe I would like to get clarity on. It will first be on the small modular reactors. I want to check also, Chair, what is the progress or progress expected in the rollout of the small modular reactors technology at decommissioned coal power stations? And Chair, I would like to know what are the timelines and potential partners for this initiative? Chair, also, I will want to check on the multipurpose research reactors. What is the status of the MPRR project, and what are its capabilities as compared to Safari 1? And what is the timeline for its development and funding, including the 2 billion for detailed design? Number 3, Chair, I wanted to check on the medical isotopes. What is Nexa's plans to grow the production and services related to radioisotopes beyond the iodine and potassium, etc.? What are other maybe isotopes that are being considered for production and market expansion? Lastly, Chair, I wanted maybe to get clarity on, or maybe just check if the department or the entity has submitted its annual performance plan to the Auditor General of South Africa to review its key performance indicators before it was finalized. Thank you, Chair.
Chairperson, may I go ahead?
Yes, yes,
Okay,
Honorable.
great. Thanks, Chair. Apologies for the background noise. They're doing a lot of construction work at Acacia, so if you can't hear me, just indicate. Chair, thank you very much for the presentation, and to the Nexa CEO and the team. I think it's really wonderful to see an SOE or SOC have a positive turnaround from, I think, the 21-22 financial year and even before that. So it is really a good story that we want to tell, and we really do appreciate that. Now, given that there's greater stability now in the turnaround of Nexa, how are you intending to grow the different spheres in which you operate? And then also, and I think it did come out in the presentation, I mean, how are you going to popularize the work of Nexa, for lack of a better word? How do we get that kind of public acceptance? And I think I've said this in previous meetings before, that it does require a deliberate approach. You know, we need to tell the good story in terms of, when I say popularize, you know, that there's a very high EAF, the stability, you know, the world benchmarks, etc. So I'm just interested in how we're going to do that. And I'm also just wanting to appreciate and welcome the fact that there's no longer any debt on the books of Nexa. And I think that's something really to be lauded and to be appreciated. But other than that, Chair, I'm covered by other members. Thank you.
Chairperson. Chairperson. Chairperson.
Right, I think maybe Chairperson's having a challenge with her network. I'm assuming, Honorable Mbata, you want to come in to make a comment?
I think Mr. Mbata, you can continue.
Yeah, let's have Mr. Mbata. Honorable Mbata, you're muted now. Go ahead with your comments or your questions.
Okay. Thank you very much to the executive and the minister for the presentation. I would like to ask 3 questions. Currently, in the world stage, the nuclear as a technology is on favorable moments. It is on various spheres, and South Africa lead on the medical sphere because of how we've led and started and continue to actually lead. We currently have several millions who have been helped as a result of our interventions in medical technologies. However, now we have a new type of problem. That's our electricity security problem. And we have identified this technology as an ever-fulfilling initiative that could be utilized as a country, in particular because we don't have much wind. No matter how much we like to blow our wind and actually fascinate ourselves with the strength of that wind is not helping us. So the nuclear technology is the only option sustainable currently, reversible, and able to continue with us for over 20 years. And having heard what the CEO and the chairperson and the minister aspire to do, I am fully confident that these will lead our country forward, and they will destine us separately from the worlds apart in terms of the initial initiatives and preservation of the current initiatives and the post ideas initiative, which means things that we have researched and physically inspire ourselves with. I'm so inspired about the products that have been developed as a result. They are feasible, they are profitable, and they are well marked for world markets. However, we need to do some of these things urgently to end our load shedding, we need nuclear, and we need more of nuclear. And we need to establish the extent to which we will never have problems again under electricity. Because if we don't do that, we will always go back guessing on what works for us. We need, as a country, to make a determination of what works for us and what is sustainable for us. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Fasia.
That's Honorable Mbata. Don't steal my words for Fasia.
No, I want to first thank Honorable Fasia, and then I will follow by saying, thank you, Honorable Moses iPhone. Thank you very much for the question.
Mandla.
Yes. Let's give over to the chairperson of NECSA and also the minister. They will delegate on how to respond to these questions. Thank you. Over to you, Chairperson Nichols.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. I will answer. We're clear in different places. I'm sure my CEO has taken notes as well as I have, but I will try and go through the questions that I think is appropriate for myself, and then I will pass the rest of them across to the CEO to approach. There was a mention by somebody of debt, and I'll comment that in fact the NECSA has never had a significant debt level because no one will lend us money. So we haven't got out of debt. We just had no debt because we couldn't raise it. I'd like to make another comment, which is a little bit not asked, but it was a question of how efficient are we. And I will just make a comment in terms of funding. We have a parallel organization in Australia called ANSTO, the Australian Nuclear Science Technology Organization, which also has about 1,500, 1,700 people. It also runs a research reactor very similar to Safari, or in fact, similar to the NPR we wish to buy. It also occupies space in the isotope production industry and also does research. So, and it's also funded in part by government grants. It is interesting that our government grant, I think, is around 900 million. Their government grant is around 3.2 billion rand. So we are several times more efficient than our Australian friends in terms of using state money to develop nuclear technology. Quick reference point. If I go back to Honourable Paulson, he started out with a question of the build time of nuclear plants. And the China builds in 5 to 7 years, and other countries have done much worse than that. And the extreme example probably is in France and the USA, where they've spent, and Finland, where they've spent decades building some nuclear plants. And the question was, do we collaborate with China in delivering small modular reactors on schedule? Can I separate the questions out slightly? And I think I'd like to, it's a very important one to answer. If you look at nuclear plants construction, that's not the deal making up to it, but from when you start pouring concrete until when you have it commercial, the current accepted reference point is about 5 to 7 years, as was stated. And that's under good conditions. The best ever achieved was 37 months. That was in Japan some years ago. And that schedule is met as a function of how well experienced and the construction team is and how standardized the reactor is. So if you look at the Chinese, the Russians, the South Koreans, all building standardized machines, all achieving these kinds of schedules, both domestically and overseas. And so the answer to who you collaborate with in terms of delivering on time and budget is you deal with somebody who is currently got experience in building reactors. And in fact, if you've got the Chinese and you go back to the 1980s, they built their first one rather badly and rather slowly. The Russians post the collapse of the USSR, their first reactor was not a success. I mean, they finished them, but they were very late and very low. So you learn as you go along. And the reason that Coburg was built so well in 1976 to 84, and I will point out it was sabotaged by the ANC in 82, which sort of put back it by 18 months. So you could argue it was close to 6 years before the sabotage, was because the French were then into a serial construction of a standardized machine, and they could offer that machine at that schedule. So I think the first comment I'll make is I wouldn't want to comment whether they're dealing with the Chinese or somebody else, but whoever you deal with for a nuclear power plant, to me, there's two golden rules. One is you buy it turnkey, don't reinvent it if you're building a large reactor. And the second one is that you actually go with somebody who has a current track record of building plants on time. And that's not a question of race, it's a question of have you been doing it? So the French are now not doing it very well. They will get better as they build more again. They were brilliant back in the 70s and the 80s. I hope I've answered that question. And there's some questions I'll answer, and and in terms of small modular reactors, I'll come to that in a second. Honourable Milam asked a question, I think aimed at me on that, and I'll try and come back to that question. In terms of Safari-1 spent fuel, it's a very high-level answer. Safari's spent fuel has, since the beginning, since 1976, when it started, 65 it started up, stored the fuel in what we call the pipe store. It is a location on the Nexus site with vertical shafts, basically pipes, into which we insert the spent fuel. It is now being extended. We're in the middle of the process with the regulator. We're getting approval to extend it for the extended life of Safari. The fuel sits there and has been there, stored in that way for the last 50 years. There is no there's no danger seen from that store, either to on-site or off-site. At some point in the future, that fuel will get transported from the pipe store to a final repository, along with the same repository that Eskom will be using for the Koeberg fuel. But when I say in some time, that could well be 80 or 90 years or even longer. But there is no health risk as far as we can determine from that fuel, and there is no mechanism by which we would see that fuel releasing activity in the environment. In other words, there is no machinery trying to maintain it cooled. It's sitting in silos and self-cooling. I'll leave the rest of the questions because they're somewhat detailed. I'll go down to the small, on the Milam's question, if I may, on small modular reactors. And he asked to catch from the horse's mouth. I think that makes me a horse. I'm not sure if I can take that discussion. But he asked a couple of questions about what is the envisaged next role and what is the current status of SMRs in the world. And I'll just answer those two questions very carefully. What Nexa envisaged doing, and we've said this prior, is we envisage going into a partnership, into a joint venture with an overseas SMR developer. While the development was, or the PBMR was, in a sense, the world's first acceptable commercial SMR. We almost created that genre. That project is now in cold reserve, put it gently, and restarting it would be quite an expensive and long-term activity. We believe the skill set we have, and that would help us to start up a joint venture with an SMR firm, and we believe that we would then create a joint venture company.
Chair?
Yeah. I think the chairperson's network is going very bad.
Ideally,
struggling.
rights to sell this design, which
Maybe I can come in, Chair, while he deals with the connection. So maybe while still
Yeah, you
on
can
that,
come in. I can hear that he is struggling with the
Yes,
network, as I had said before, that
Yes.
there is a lentuka, bad
Weather.
weather in
Thank
other
you.
provinces. Sure,
Thank
continue.
you. All right. Oh, I see, Chairperson, you're back?
Yeah,
I'm back. I'll just try and finish off very quickly. I apologize, I dropped out just now. So in to answer the question that we would see Nexa being the owner operator and the licensee of the first reactor, with the view that a lot of the problems of SMRs is building the, even if the design's established, building the first one in a country, licensing regulation, and then it would be available to roll out to other customers from that company. As for what is the SMR status, quite rightly, as Honourable Milam said, in the world today, there are two commercial SMRs or sets of SMRs in operation, one for a high temperature gas cooled reactor, a pebble bed type reactor in Shandong in China, and one in Russia, which essentially is a water cooled reactor, a baby version of Kuberg, not that Kuberg was in the design at all, which is in Russia. The Russians are not only got the first ones operating, they're on a ship, but they're basically a barge. They're building several of these, and so in terms of those two designs, the Russians are building, I think, about 12 more of the same design in various places. Uzbekistan has ordered 6, I believe, and so that's an ongoing aggressive program of actually building them. They're real, they exist. In China, what's called the HTRPM, which is the Chinese high temperature reactor. They've got 2 units running commercially on the grid as we speak at Shandong, and they're in construction with 6 more. So they've got a serious program going. There is also in construction in China, and Mr. Tabashi was there in China in the visit. They built a water-cooled, a cut-down version of a Kuberg reactor called Lingalong 100, I think. Maybe I got the name wrong. ACP 100. And that one, and that one is going to start up this year. We have not heard of any future construction of that. There are a very large number of designs around the world under development. And what is most interesting is that in the USA, there are several designs that are funded and are essentially licensed. There was Canada, there's a small boiling water reactor, which has currently been given construction licenses approved for. So there are a number that are funded projects in the States. But as of today, the reactor that are actually in service is one in China, is a Chinese high temperature reactor and a Russian water cooled reactor. If someone asked me what the rollout in this country, and that's another question asked a bit later, my view is that if we were to go with a design that currently is in commercial operation, for example, the Chinese or the Russians, but probably like Chinese because the technology is PBMR style, then we could have the first lead unit up and running on the Kuberg on the Pelindaba site, probably around 2031, 2032. Prior to the actual startup of the reactor, it would be highly credible for follow-on machines to be ordered because we would know the Chinese design works and we'd have got far enough in the construction of the first one to sort out the key issues of licensing, regulation, economics, and the rest of it. So idealistically, by the mid-2030s, we could be rolling out small modular reactors onto being commissioned on the sites of the old coal stations, Komati, Hudfay, Camden, and so on. That would imply construction starting on those sites probably in around 2030. To put timelines. Someone asked for timelines, best timelines. If we decide to go with a design that has yet to be built, that is still in the design phase, you can add any time you want to that process. So one of the key questions we have to ask ourselves is, do we go with what is available today, or do we wait for something later to come out? My views will be obvious that we go with what we've got now, and the logical partner would be probably the Chinese in terms of their technology development. I'm just quickly trying to look earlier. So that's the SMR progress. In terms of the Pelchem, I'll give an overview. There was a question asked again by Honourable Milam about, is Pelchem, and it's always been sick, is it actually dead? My answer is no. We have literally gone from over 60 million rand loss 3 years ago to over 40 million rand last year. This year, the numbers I heard for last year is about 13 million. And with that, I'm going to pass across to Loiso for the rest of the questions. So thank you. And Loiso, the floor is yours. I hope my audio held up reasonably.
Thank you. And I did hold up, Chair. Thank you very much. Maybe if I go back then to Honorable Paulson, where the remaining question was about the people retention, seeing that we're going into growth, or the attrition rate, as it was asked earlier on. What we've seen is an attrition rate of about less than 5% in the last year, and that's also still going to be audited. And our view has always been around ensuring that we give people meaningful work and we give a glimmer of hope in the organization. We noted that there was a lot of people that were leaving in the earlier years when we started embarking on the strategy, but that subsequently declined because people were seeing hope in the organization. And I believe that now that we're in a growth phase, we'll see that attrition rate much lower than what we are seeing now, which is around 4.8, I think. So we're doing our best in terms of meaningful work. We're doing our best in terms of retaining the skill by ensuring that we do the transfer of skills to the people. So you'll see in one of the measures that we have under the people, we talk about retention, knowledge retention plans. We have those for all the critical positions. We developed them this year, and it's been quite a very good activity. First, identifying the critical roles, and then putting down the knowledge retention plans. But very important, it is that allowing people, giving them space in terms of implementing work instead of having these sitting and gathering dust in the shelf or in a drawer. I hope that covers that one. If I come then to Honorable Thing, thanks for the kind words on the turnaround that should be used also as the benchmark. We're sharing our lessons to the best that we can. Yesterday, we met with CSIR. We're comparing notes with each other. I met with Eskom at some point. We're sharing notes. So there's a lot of cross-pollination of these state-owned organizations, and we're sharing to the best that we can and where appropriate. Then Honorable Thing also had a question on, other than engineering services, what are we supplying to Quebec? I think most importantly is that because we've got a facility that can produce components and equipment, we're involved in some of the projects right now. There's a project that is a post-Fukushima project that is currently being implemented in this outage, which involves piping and valves and welding. So we're doing that work in Cape Town. We also do get involved when they need some skills in terms of radio protection services. And it is very important that we always share the skills and the knowledge in there. And we're also looking at expanding our activities in the broader Eskom, not just Quebec. We are poised to sign an MOU with Eskom at a broader level because we can provide much more than what is needed at Quebec and provide to support them some work in the coal stations as well, because we do have a facility that can produce nuclear-grade equipment, so that means also it can provide coal-grade equipment and other technologies. And then in terms of the educational programs that we have, that was another question. For schools, we've identified about 5 schools around the Pelindaba site that we are working with very closely, and they were invited actually on our 60th anniversary as well, because we're seeing them as our pipeline and feeder schools going forward. But what we're doing broadly as well is that there is one of the events that we do embark on is there's a science week that we have, I think it's around July every year, where we've got many schools from Northwestern Gauteng primarily coming to our site, taking them through the visitors center. And we have our leaders, including myself, going to actually talk about our journeys just to make sure that kids understand in terms of how they can pursue a career within the nuclear business, and that it does not only require nuclear physicists and scientists. We've got accountants in our midst, we've got lawyers, etc., etc. So that's one of the biggest ones that we do in a week, and I think we'll do even more work. We're talking about it with CSIR yesterday, that will dovetail as the 2 science institutions in the country and make it bigger and better going forward. I've answered the attrition rate on people and the retention of nuclear knowledge as well. I've spoken about that. Beneficiation. So the issue of beneficiation, indeed, uranium is what we need to continue to beneficiate. It is good to see that uranium has made it as one of the critical minerals in the list of the South African list. I know the document might still be undergoing approval stages, but it's good to see that this particular mineral is part of that list. The beneficiation, really, we see it directly in that you irradiate the uranium target plates. They come out as isotopes that can be either injected in a human body or be put on equipment for non-destructive testing. We're also looking at Pelchem as part of that story because they beneficiate fluorspar, which is mined also in this country. And it's taken through the processes to a point where it can be used as xenon difluoride or other fluorides that are used in electronic components around the world. So those two minerals become very key for us. I must state that the uranium that we're currently using in our reactor is not uranium from South Africa, and we need to move into a space of ensuring that we do beneficiate our own uranium by making sure that it goes through our reactor as part of its value chain. The other question was on the projected deterioration of the NTP profits. Group CFO, I don't know if you want to say something on that. Sawari.
Thank you, CEO. So maybe if I start with that answer from Honorable Maxim Manton in terms of the projected decline in the profits, and then I'll also answer some of the financial questions that also came through on his side as well. So in terms of NTP, the main reason why we've had a decline in the profits has been in terms of the purchase amount for the fuel and target plates. So for the fuel and target plates, the amounts that we incur is an amount of about 385 million. So the 385 million, okay. So in terms of the amount, it's about 385 million, and that is an amount which has been quite substantial and an amount that we have incurred in this current financial year, 25-26, and it wasn't previously there in the previous financial year. So what has also led to this price being so significant has been in terms of the exchange rate, as the GCEO has indicated. We import the fuel and target plates, and these are coming internationally. So as the currency goes up and we have those increased forex amounts that we have to pay into that environment, we see an increase in the cost. So that 385 million has been something which has been quite substantial. There was also another question from Honorable Maxim Manton in terms of how much are we spending in terms of the R&I, the research and innovation, over the MTF period. So the amount that we spend for research and innovation, if we look at the 3 years over the MTF period, it's an amount of 166.405 for 25-26. This is million. For 26-27, it's 176.8 million. And then in terms of 27-28, we're reading in that amount of about 180 million. The way this is funded in terms of the R&I, 76% of this amount is coming through from the grant funding, because that is the main area of where our funding comes from. And then 22% of this comes from the commercial activities. And thereafter, the balance of this amount comes through from the external funders. So that is how we fund our R&I. There was also a question from Honorable Milam. This was to do with the ratios, the specific ratios that we are looking at. So in terms of the specific ratios that we're looking at, we concentrate on 3 main categories of the ratios. So we're looking at the liquidity ratios, we're looking at the solvency and debt ratios, and we're looking at the profitability ratios. The question also was requesting that we find out some clarity in terms of what we are doing to improve the various ratios. So on the liquidity ratios, which is made up of the current ratios, quick ratios, and the cash ratios, what we're doing is in terms of our liquidity, we are starting to have quite a dedicated drive in terms of collecting our debtors. We've had some long debtors, and it's one of the items from an audit perspective that we need to focus on. So we have been very intentional in terms of collecting our debtors, the long outstanding debtors, which is including and relating to that liquidity ratio. We're also making sure that we can increase the profitability, as we have started seeing across the group for each and every one of the elements. So we are seeing that there's a profitability that's coming through that's also increasing that liquidity that's coming through, because the more profit we make, the more we're able to start diversifying, selling, and also being able to increase the liquidity and the cash that we ultimately hold. In terms of liquidity and debt ratio, as has been indicated, we do not have debt. So what we have been looking at in that environment is the profitability also looks at the statement of financial position, where we start seeing the reduced losses that we are seeing are starting to improve the solvency. So we are starting to see some green shoots in this environment, because the more profits we start making, the more we start having the inroads in terms of the previous negative equity that was there previously. But now with the solvency and liquidity, we're starting to see that improving. The third category, which is the tail of profitability, that is where we have spoken about also looking at the products that were coming through in the different environments to make sure that we can also include and increase the profitability. So that talks to GP percentage, making sure that we are intentional with our expenses, optimizing the expenses, and making sure that we are being mindful of how much expense we're incurring, especially as we're looking at the revenue that we bring in. So making sure that all of the products that we're bringing in make business sense and are sustainable. That also talks to the return on assets and the return on equity. So that category talks to all of the categories of the ratios that we're looking at and that we're intentional on. There was also a question in terms of the Pelcam environment, whether it was a case, and this is from Honorable Milam, of mistaken profits or what is transpiring in that space. So the GCO has mildly touched on, we've had and we are seeing a reduced loss situation in the Pelcam environment. They're starting to turn that business around quite significantly. One of the key products in that space has been xenon difluoride. So with xenon difluoride, we're seeing with that it has been quite profitable in the market, and that is one of the things that has started coming through in terms of the results in that environment. So the thing that impacted the delta between the negative loss of about the 14 million, just below the profitability target of the break even, was the fact that we had some movement in the market in the fourth quarter. Internationally, some of the geopolitics had an impact in terms of them, but they're working quite diligently to ensure that they're able to address that situation. There was also a question from Honorable Babti, and that was in terms of what makes up our current liabilities. So the current liabilities that we're seeing is an amount of about 7 billion. What makes that up in the main is what we refer to as our D&D. So if we look at the D&D, we've got an amount of about 4.3 billion that is part of those numbers. The additional amount, which is quite significant as well, is our deferred income, also coming through from our D&D and the work that needs to be executed on before we're able to realize the income that comes through, which is why it is deferred. Another big component of about 260 million is coming through from the retirement benefit obligation. One thing which is quite important is that with the long-term liabilities and the non-current liabilities, these are matched to the assets, and it's one of the key considerations to ensure that we are a going concern as we match that to the assets. Then in terms of, and maybe just to touch quite briefly, there was a question in terms of some of the isotopes that we're also looking at in the NTP space and what type of isotopes we're looking at. So in addition to Moly-99, we've also got iodine-131, which is a byproduct of Moly. So both products come through from the process. We've also got lutetium that we're looking at in that environment. We also have the chemicals and the isotopes that come out of the radiopharmaceuticals. So the radiopharmaceuticals is mainly targeting and serving the South African and sub-Saharan African market, and that is the main isotope that we're looking at. Thank you, CEO. I think I've attended to the financial questions. I'll hand back over to yourself. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. I think then that covers Honorable Tring's comments. Honorable Milam, I think several have been answered, but there was an issue around the KPIs in that we speak about 100% of the annual plan of action for the MPR. Indeed, correct. I think going forward, we'll just clarify what are the key milestones. The key milestones that we have for the MPR this year, I'll just highlight 3. One is to apply for the environmental authorization on our site at the NNR, as well as environmental authorization by DFFE. But the biggest milestone of all is going out to market to make sure that we can get a vendor for the MPR going forward. But that is subject to having all the I's dotted and T's crossed in terms of the prerequisites as expected from the National Treasury Front. So that's the MPR. On the DND, it's primarily the commissioning of some of our waste equipment and decontaminating a few of our critical buildings that we intend for recirculating for use in our stable. But I take the note and comment that going forward, for those type of measures, we'll just highlight the key milestones going forward. I think that covers all Honorable Malham's questions. Honorable Bhatti, thanks for the good news, for acknowledging the good news. And then the issue of skills as a service offering with no targets. So what has happened is that, like I've said, there is a transitioning of the strategy. So with these growth programs and the learning academy related aspects in terms of relocating it, these are going to start featuring in terms of having KPIs in the next cycle, because now we're still finishing the old cycle, which was meant for stabilization. So these growth related ones will be in the following cycle. So that was just a flavor of what is to come on the next strategy and how we link the current and the future strategy for the next financial cycle going into the following 5 years. Then the Learning Academy capacity. At this point in time, we can handle about 400 learners per year. And we're looking at least doubling that when you go into the growth program. So it talks to the size of the facility that we want to construct going forward. And in there, we're going to be seeking very strong partnerships going forward. Honorable Nkosi, progress on SMRs and coal stations. So that one we had an advanced discussion with Eskom. And Eskom is really looking forward to having the SMRs replacing the coal fleet. And what we need to do is to ensure that there is alignment in terms of the infrastructure that is already there, whether it can accommodate the SMRs, and for all intents and purposes it can. I'm aware that Eskom on their side have also started looking at the strategic environmental impact assessments for their old coal plants to see how they can be transitioned into nuclear. From our side, we are trying to match the key outputs of what our SMR could have, as the chairperson indicated, that as the developer of that technology, now we'll need to look into deployment of such facilities in the coal fleet. So there is a lot of background work happening between NECSA and Eskom. And then the status of MPR and the capabilities. So the status of the MPR is that we still need to go out to market and procure a proper vendor that we can work with to start a structure, designing number one, and then implementing and construction. The capabilities of the MPR is, like, I would say, it's more of a Safari on steroids, in that it will be a reactor just like Safari, but it will be able to do a whole lot more. Irradiation of target plates for use in isotope production, that becomes one of the key issues or key activities that we do. But the biggest thing around it is what we call the beamline facilities. We're looking at having beam lines that will be used in the science fraternity. Currently, we have only 2 instruments. With the beam hall lines, we're looking at about 6 instruments that can do a whole lot of different capabilities going forward. So let's just imagine a Safari that is got more capabilities in terms of throughput, efficiencies, as well as other capabilities. And then there was a question by Honorable Nkosi around the fact that whether our annual plan has been sent to the Auditor General for review. And I must state that what we typically do is we do not send the plan to the Auditor General for review. What we do is we generally learn from the lessons of the prior audit. For example, if there was a problem with some of our measures that maybe were debatable, and we fine-tune those, with the view that obviously the audit actually happens typically in the period of June and July. So they'll be auditing what comes out of the prior year. But the plans and the KPIs for the current year are not. Suffice to say that we've taken lessons because there's been continuity from the prior year that they have already audited. But Auditor General is also embarking on an early audit so that we can beat the timelines of the audit with the main company as well as the subsidiaries. I think that's it for Honorable Nkosi. Honorable Fasiha is the issue of popularity and being deliberate on that popularity. That's one of our campaigns. I will state that if you look at the history, this predates me and the chairperson of the board. I think it was very difficult for NECSA to go out there boldly and talk about the nuclear technology because of the whole lot of things that are happening. We've built now a company that we believe is built on solid ground and is based on good governance. It is now the right time to go out and start spreading the nuclear word. We have started a big campaign where we had in February a media roundtable. We had about 18 media houses where we shared our strategy and we shared our direction and for growth. And it was a very good engagement, and we're building on that. So that was in February. In March, we started out. We followed up with the Safari, the 60-year celebrations. There's a whole lot of other activities that are planned, and our plan also is to invade the space of social media. Plans are in place, and we're going to be doing this in collaboration also. I know Eskom is also working on something similar. We want to have a coordinated effort together with the Department of Electricity and Energy. So that is on the plan. It is a deliberate effort. It's not going to happen by natural osmosis. It has to be deliberate and be center-led as we move forward. So that's a point and the challenge that we take on. Then if I go to Honorable Mbata, he mentioned an issue that nuclear is favored internationally. On the electricity side, we are suffering, but we are currently leading on the isotope side. From our end, we play a very strong role in providing inputs as appropriate as an interested and affected party in the development of the IRP. We're not developing it, but we provide the inputs in ensuring that nuclear makes it into the IRP. It is very important for me to state that for us to have a solid business case for the front-end fuel that we want to do, we need to have a home base of nuclear power generation of about 10 gigawatts. And once we have that, it gives us a solid ground from which we can launch our activities related to fuel manufacturing for own and export uses. So it's very important that we stay close to that process, but it has its own stages to follow, its own influences. So our input is not the only input that we have, but it is very crucial that the IRP gives us a direction so that we can use that as an enabler for other activities for the nuclear industry to thrive. With that, thank you very much. And I think there was a note that it's an inspiring presentation that we've made. Thank you very much. We hope that we're going to grow in that direction. Thank you very much. Back to you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Loyiso. I pass you. I have nothing to add to Loyiso's comments, and I look forward and I pass back to the chair, the Honourable Chairman.
Chair, can I come in?
Minister, I don't see the chair on the platform.
Yeah, someone must give me the green light.
I think proceed, Minister. The chair is now on the platform.
Okay, no, that's fine. I think the colleagues have exhausted the more direct question, but I just want to attend to the more policy issues which are inherent in some of the questions, but not necessarily as directly. So we have taken a decision that we are resetting the nuclear program in the country. We have to leave the care and the maintenance on the PBMR And as the chair of the board makes an important observation, is that it's going to be an expensive enterprise. And that's why we have then given NERCSA the go-ahead to look for partners and see how best we can configure that initiative. Now, there are a number of suitors across the globe, but I think there's a logical, if you like, ally in this space. The Chinese are that natural ally. Why are they? On a number of fronts, just to say a few of those. The first one is that they've got 30 reactors under construction, accounting for close to 30%, anything between 27 to 30% of the global reactors that are known to be under construction. We made the point that they are only one of two countries that have been able to advance the SMR technology into commercial operation, and Loyiso and the team had the privilege of visiting that site, so that there's a more, if you like, direct appreciation of what the feat that the Chinese have achieved. The Chinese have got an ambition of building 70 gigawatts of nuclear powered electricity, I think 2025 to 2026. So that's the biggest of any country in the world. The CEO makes the point that we already are supplying them with the isotopes. So there's already an existing commercial relationship between us and the Chinese. So we then concluded on the back of this an agreement. That agreement and MOU creates, if you like, a basis upon which NERCSA will be able to engage with the Chinese on commercial terms and see how best we are able to achieve the ambitions that we have set there for ourselves forward. And I'm confident that at least if the discussion that I had about 2 weeks ago with our counterparts in China is anything to go by, we're confident that we're going to find each other, and we're going to migrate into an arena of a commercial transaction that meets the interest of both parties, and NERCSA will then be set on a path to ensure that we are able to reset the nuclear program in the country. The second issue is nuclear is a stated policy of government. Nuclear power is a stated policy of government, and that's why we worked very hard working with ESCOM to ensure that the 2 reactors for power generation get extension. Koeberg 1 is succeeded. I have no reason to doubt that Koeberg number 2 will not succeed. So extension of life for 20 years. And Loyiso makes an important observation. So from our own studies suggest that for you to be able to reset a nuclear program and build, if you like, a sustainable pipeline, build the kind of skills that are required, be able to participate in the entire nuclear fuel cycle, you need to build a program of about 10 gigawatts. The IRP will come, and then we will make a policy statement on the role and place of nuclear. And that policy statement will be consistent with what we're saying here. I'll not preempt what cabinet will say, but I'm more than confident in keeping with what Honorable Mbata says, that I think there have been missteps previously. Of course, the previous program did not get positive attention in the public domain. The issue was not the technology, the issue was the politics, the issue was the procurement process that soiled an excellent program. And we shouldn't be sitting with the crisis of the electricity deficit. We shouldn't be sitting with the challenges around the quality of, or if you like, the emissions level that we're experiencing now, because nuclear, we know it's a clean technology. So we are not about to commit the same mistake. So we are sitting with a deposit of uranium, and as I've said before, Loyiso working with the partners will look to see how best you are able to enrich it, but you need a sizable program. We are not about to stand our ambitions. We'll go that route to ensure that nuclear is a significant part of energy generation. Of course, the isotopes for research purposes, I think the case is compelling. Of course, even on the power side is compelling, but at least on the isotope side, has not attracted the kind of negative perception. And then Loyiso is absolutely right. We're going to be very aggressive in the public domain to state the facts, because what we know is that many of the conversations that are in the public domain are devoid of the facts. So it's just sensationalism. It's just people, commentators, just taking chances. People who are not familiar with the technology, appropriated to themselves the knowledge of this technology. Of course, we are not helped by the fact that our previous program was a checkered one, as I made the point, mired in controversy. So they simply invoke that as a scarecrow to threaten the public from receiving this. As Loyiso makes the issue around social acceptance, we are building that with the intelligentsia, people who, academia, who understand this much, much better. They will have a better reception. But we will meet the others pound for pound, because they thrive on misinformation. We will state the facts. But I want to say to this committee, nuclear is the future. So there's no one who will stand before the role and place of nuclear. As a country, if you decide for some unknown reason, but I'm confident that the critical mass of the parties in parliament and also in this committee are in full support of this program, that we will succeed. But if for one reason or the other, we decide, no, this is not the place to be, the world will move. In the same manner that we lost out on the PBMR, we are going to lose out on this. So the world don't wait for us. So they will move. They continue to make advances. Even the most advanced powers in the world outside China, they are going that route. The UK had made the point, 2050, 1 in 4 electrons will be coming from nuclear. The current administration of Trump, the US administration is going that route. The place of nuclear in France is known, so they are not prevaricating around the ambition. And in fact, they're the ones who are helping to address the energy deficit in Europe as a result of the position that some of the European countries have taken. What they don't share with the rest of the world is that when they have energy deficit, they draw from the excesses that are there in France. So essentially, nuclear is anchoring, if you like, energy security in Europe. So this is the future. So that's a policy statement. We are going that route. So the conversation could be about scale. We can have that conversation. That nuclear will be a big part of energy generation. No, it's a moot point. We are done. We are going that route. I think it's a point I want to emphasize, and we have said NECSA will be at the forefront of that initiative. Thanks, Comrade Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Minister, and also the chairperson of the NECSA. I am really happy about the responses. I hope all honorable members are covered for now. If there is anything that we think that we've missed it, they should write it down through the secretary, and we will send it to the department and also to NECSA. They will also respond to. Thank you very much. Ariko, is there anything so that we can release them? Yeah?
For today.
Yes.
Yeah,
Nothing?
so tomorrow, just an announcement. Tomorrow's meeting at 9:30 with Eskom. So yeah, it's a virtual meeting as well.
9:30.
9:30, yes, Chair.
Okay. All right. That's just a reminder and also an announcement. See you then, honorable member, and we'll be with Eskom tomorrow. Thank you very much. All the people that have managed to join the meeting, I really appreciate that. Thanks. The meeting has adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Thanks. Thanks, bye.
Thank you. Right.
you.
Good colleagues.
Thank you and goodbye, Chair.
Recording stopped.